Good job.
How are you?
Good, how are you? Which side do you stand on?
I don't care, but this mic is very hot. So
It is live.
picking up all of this. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us on short notice. We especially appreciate our media partners who are here with us as we work to get out information on what is happening out there on the ground right now. We thank you for being here. Of course, the evidence of our history-making snowpack and spring thaw is now being felt throughout the state. You've seen the sinkholes really all across Utah. The potholes all across Utah. We have big sinkholes in Kaysville. We had a mudslide in Parley's Canyon. This morning we had a rock slide up Fairview Canyon yesterday. The flooding in Immigration Canyon last night and today, and in pockets throughout the state. We're certain that these flood conditions will continue in the coming months. We are really just at the front end of getting all of that record water downstream where it needs to go. Now, we have been blessed with a little bit of a reprieve today, although there is more precipitation falling. The temperatures have fallen significantly, and that is certainly helping those conditions, the runoff slowing down now as we've frozen everything back up, and that will reset as we start to have warmer temperatures coming into next week. I will say that from the prognostications that we thought we were going to be a little better off. Mid 70s is different though than 83 at the airport a couple days ago, and so hitting in the 80s, that certainly got things moving. And once it starts moving, it's really hard to slow it all down. So having 3 days in the 70s and low 80s has certainly got it moving. This gives us a reset, and we're hoping that these more moderate temperatures will continue moving forward. But again, we understand that floods are very likely as we continue, and we want people, citizens, and counties and communities to continue to prepare for whatever might come over the next two plus months. The state has been very proactive in helping our cities and towns prepare, getting them the state funding to ensure that they have the supplies that they need. We kind of on a wing and a prayer and with some faith asked the legislature for $5 million in flood mitigation money before there was any snowstorms, and we ended up probably needing a lot more than $5 million. And so we are working with the legislature as we assess needs to figure out how much we will need. And they are very open. Again, we have budgeted for rainy days for a long time, or snowy days, or floody days, or whatever it is we're looking for. And these are the types of days that we have been preparing for. We've also had great collaboration between all of our state and local agencies to secure heavy equipment, secure water pumps, sandbag machines. We've also been busy clearing drainages and culverts to remove debris and prepare for the water that is coming. I want to thank our state agencies who are here behind me for responding so quickly, and we'll hear from a few of them in just a minute. I will say one of the reasons we have an open space here in this warehouse is because we have moved out 1.4 million, I think, is that right? 1.4 million sandbags already, gotten them out into the communities where they are certainly very, very much needed. But right now, my message to Utahns is twofold. First, please do what you can right now to prepare. Again, we've had a pause now. You've seen where the water is coming, so we have a break in the action. Pay attention to local conditions. Stay away from fast-moving rivers and streams. Fill sandbags if you can. Ask for help if you need it. More information is available at floodhazards.utah.gov. That's floodhazards.utah.gov. Second, state employees, just a reminder, we issued an executive order allowing you to use administrative leave to help with flood efforts. If you've been thinking about doing that and you are in a position to help, we encourage you to take advantage of that administrative leave to help fill sandbags in your area where needed. Now, we have many state experts who are here with us today, so let me give a run of show so you will know who we're going to hear from, and we will go in this order. We appreciate Commissioner Jess Anderson, who is here with us, and Chris Hamlet from the Department of Emergency Management. Chris will talk about the state's role in emergency management. Then we'll hear from Joel Ferry with the Department of Natural Resources. He will talk about the impacts on water and infrastructure. We have Kim Shelley here, who is here with us from the Department of Environmental Quality. She will talk about water quality and safety and issues whenever there's flooding and houses and basements get flooded. Carlos Braceras is here with us from UDOT to talk about transportation impacts. And then we have Craig Butters here is here with us from the Department of Agriculture to talk about the impacts on our farmers and ranchers. And then I'll wrap things up, and the Lieutenant Governor is here with me as well. We appreciate her leadership, and we will take a few questions after that. So I'm happy to turn it over right now to Chris.
Thank you, Governor, and thanks everybody for being here today. I just wanted to mention back in the fall, I ran into Governor Cox in the Capitol building, and I think it was around November or so, and we just barely had our first couple of good storms, and he told me that he had to apologize because he felt like he had this gut feeling that we're going to be flooding in the spring. So here we are having a press conference about flooding, and I did want to say that I appreciate that he had that gut feeling and then acted on it. As was mentioned, the legislature, the governor's office, Lieutenant Governor have been really good to us as far as leaning forward, preparing for this inevitable event that we're now just getting into. It was mentioned that this is going to probably go on for a couple of months, and there's a lot of work to be done, but we got a good start on it. As was mentioned, we pushed out a 1.5 million sandbags already throughout the state. Almost every county in the state has received some sort of assistance at this point, and all of those who have requested it have received it. In addition to sandbags, we've been working with them to get heavy equipment to clean out waterways and culverts and other areas that might cause problems when the floodwaters begin. So a lot of work's been done on that already. Also want to mention that the state has also been recognized as having one of the nation's best state disaster recovery accounts. We do have a healthy recovery account that can be used by state agencies to help in responses like this to natural disasters, and I'm sure we'll be leaning on that as well as we get into this event further. Just a little background on the Division of Emergency Management. We fall under the Department of Public Safety and Commissioner Jess Anderson, and we're charged with basically all things preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery when they come to emergency management. But it's important to note that we can't do it alone. We're an agency of about 60 employees, and we rely heavily on our other state agency partners, many who are here today, when we activate our State Emergency Response Center, our state EOC. So when that comes together, we rely on everybody's subject matter expertise and the resources that they are able to bring to the flood fight and other hazards that we have to deal with. And we're currently doing that. We're at a level 3 enhanced level activation right now, and we anticipate that will go to the next level shortly, as we're starting to see many of the jurisdictions declare local states of emergency. So that's something we're looking at, which will also trigger some of our resources. Because the governor was worried about flooding back in the fall, and we knew what was coming as well with all the snowpack and the conditions, we started working with our local emergency managers way before any of the flooding was going to start. And they've done an incredible job. We have a great community of emergency managers at the local level, the tribal level, the municipalities. They all have done a great job in preparing for this, getting their sandbags ready, having plans of distribution, cleaning out their waterways, and just coordinating with the state on the efforts that they're going to make sure that we get through this as effectively as possible with as little impact to those communities as we can possibly get away with. I also just want to mention, reiterate what the governor said. Safety is paramount. Right now, we'll have a lot of opportunities for volunteers, as we saw in Salt Lake City last night and in other communities. Being safe is going to be #1 priority. We want to make sure that people understand that those waters are cold, they're fast, and if you wade in them, play in them, step in them, you may get swept off your feet. And also, you don't know what debris or hazardous materials might be in those waterways. So we just want to make sure that first and foremost, everybody is being safe. We have a lot of additional information that's available. dem.utah.gov, Division of Emergency Management, dem.utah.gov. for anybody who wants to get more information on flood insurance, flood mapping, flood preparedness, and other basic preparedness information. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Governor, and for your leadership on this issue. A lot of people are comparing this year to the 80s, 1983, 84, 85. And it reminds me, I grew up in West Corinne, down on the Bear River. And as a little kid, I would go out on our farm, and there was a big portion of it was flooded. Just as far as you could see, the lake flooded all that area. And I had the job after the floods receded of fixing the fences. I was just a little kid. I would go out with my grandpa. And my grandpa, he nicknamed me Lightning, because as we put staples in the fence, I could never hit in the same place twice, just like lightning. So I want to compare what is this year like versus the 80s, right? What are the differences? And we remember those times. Some people remember the flooding on State Street and other things. And I think what we have to look at is what have we done as a state, as managers of Utah's water resource. What have we done to prepare for just this situation? And so when you look across the state, we've done quite a bit. We've improved culverts, we've improved infrastructure, we've built several new reservoirs. For example, we have Little Dell Reservoir and Jordan Dell Reservoir, both on systems that flooded back in the 80s. And so when we look at the impacts today in state agencies throughout the state, we've made significant infrastructure improvements and investments that are going to help us manage these floodwaters. Even today, we're in uncharted territory. When you look at the snow water equivalent that's in the mountains, we are in still record-setting territory. This year has been incredible as far as the snowpack goes. That snowpack has to come down. In the 80s, when you look at it and you compare, our runoff started mid-May. This year, we're starting kind of the beginning of April. And so in the 80s, it all came down at once. It heated up really quickly. So what we're hoping for is weather like we're seeing today, where you have 3 or 4 days of warm weather, 4 or 5 days, and then it cools down. So the runoff starts, it picks up, but it's going to slow down a little bit, and we're going to ease it through. And as we see these types of trends, when we look at the forecast, we think that will continue. But ultimately, we have to be prepared, because what if it does warm up and it stays warm? We're talking about being in unprecedented territory today. The snow water equivalent that we have and the moisture that we have isn't just 10-year, 50-year, 100-year. This is all-time state record, hundreds of years. This is unbelievable, the amount of moisture that's in those mountains. And so we've got to be prepared for that, because with that, it's got to come down. It will come down, and we got to be really mindful of that. So the good news is that this year, most of our reservoirs are going to fill. We have been working actively with our reservoir managers. Our Division of Water Rights manages and helps manage those reservoirs. And what we've done is we've been doing controlled releases. So we control those releases. We let the water out now so that when the peak runoff occurs, we can take the edge off. We can take that top level off and fill our reservoirs at that point. That'll help reduce the impact of some potential flooding that we might experience. And so our dam safety section is working diligently on that, coordinating and working with our dam managers so that we have a good response. We're doing debris removal. Heavy equipment is available. Our Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands are professionals at doing this kind of work on our public lands and our watersheds. So they're out there actively removing debris and making sure that the water can move through these systems and get down to the reservoirs and ultimately to Great Salt Lake. Currently, we're actively monitoring, in addition to the surface flooding that you see, we also have the risk of landslide. That's a real concern. We're managing approximately 100 individual landslides right now, active landslides. Some smaller ones are popping up. We see some in Parley. We saw some in Fruit Heights and Davis County and other areas. So we're monitoring those. Our UGS division is monitoring those on a daily basis and making sure that we get information out to the public on where those active slides are occurring. And finally, we at the Department of Natural Resources are working closely with all of our partners so that we get the information out in a timely manner and make sure that we as Utahns are prepared for these types of events. These are serious events. These are serious times. The water has a lot of power. We need to be very mindful and we need to recognize how important our safety is in making sure that people are aware of what's going on and be safe out there. So thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Kim Shelley. I'm the Executive Director of the Utah Department of Environmental Quality. And as Joel mentioned, while Utah's record-breaking snow year is great news for the state's ongoing drought and critical water bodies like the Great Salt Lake, flooding can lead to a number of environmental concerns, including water contamination. We're coordinating closely with both drinking water and wastewater systems across the state to ensure that they are prepared for flooding and prepared to deploy necessary resources in the event that there is a compromised infrastructure of wastewater infrastructure or drinking water sources. We're asking the public to err on the side of caution when it comes to both flood water and drinking water at this time. It's best to assume that all flood water is contaminated with bacteria, viruses, and chemicals. If possible, avoid contact with flood water and definitely do not drink, swim, wade in the flood water. If contact is unavoidable, we ask that you use common sense, wash your hands with soap and clean water, cover any open wounds with waterproof bandages, and disinfect the wound after coming into contact with the water. We're also asking folks to avoid recreational water impacted by flooding for 24 to 48 hours. 48 to 72 hours. Flooding can also overwhelm drinking water and wastewater infrastructure, leading to sewage backups into homes or wastewater treatment plants, and making water treatment more challenging. The public can help prevent stormwater infrastructure from becoming overwhelmed by removing debris in their gutters and storm drains. And this is really critical for helping us avoid localized flooding that some of the Utahns are experiencing today. We also want those in areas that have been impacted by flood to pay special attention to their drinking water. While some changes in drinking water taste, smell, or appearance are normal, especially as the seasons change, if there is flooding in your area, again, err on the side of caution. And do not drink or consume the water that doesn't look, smell, or taste normal. This is especially a risk for those who rely on well systems for drinking water. If you have concerns about your drinking water, don't wash dishes, don't brush your teeth, certainly don't make food or make baby formula with the water until you know it's safe to consume. If you have any concerns, the Department of Environmental Quality is here to help. Please call our 24-hour DEQ spill line at 801-536-4123 if you suspect that flooding has caused contamination to a water body or a drinking water source. Finally, I want to thank the governor's office and the governor and lieutenant governor for their leadership and their partnership of many of the state agencies here speaking today. We're all working on behalf of Utahns during this challenging time, and I'm confident that we will get through it. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your partnership in helping us get the message out to our public. And Kim, the best thing I've learned so far today is I have an excuse not to do the dishes. So I look forward to that explanation tonight for my wife. My name's Carlos. I'm with the Utah Department of Transportation. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to prepare. We've been preparing for months for this. Obviously, as the snow's been coming down, we've been realizing that we're going to be dealing with it in two directions while it came down, and now as it's going to be coming down the mountain as well. We have about 90 maintenance stations around the state, and it's really at the local level where a lot of this planning takes place. And so our maintenance people are working with their local communities to help identify those areas that we need to work together on. You've heard a lot of this. We're cleaning a lot of culverts, a lot of pipes, a lot of ditches. We're looking for ways to make sure that when the water arrives, that it can run smoothly through, and then be prepared to remove that debris, because as you see logs and sticks come down, they clog the drains, and things happen very, very quickly when that happens. So we want to be able to respond to those as well. So we really value our local partners. They're the ones on the ground. They know that area the best, and they're very good at communicating with us on where we need to be and how we can help them be successful. This morning, I was up Little Cottonwood Canyon, and you've probably heard a little bit about Little Cottonwood Canyon. Our crews were working a couple bulldozers up there, trying to start to clear some of the slides that have been coming down. It's amazing to see the size of the avalanches that are coming down. You've heard the word unprecedented. It is absolutely unprecedented what we've seen in terms of snowfall and in terms of the way the snow has come at us and has stayed in those mountains. We've never really seen this much snow on these south facing. Those are the slopes right over the roadway before. Lots of debris, and still a lot more work to do. So we ask people to be patient with us as we work to try to make that, to make sure it's a safe road before we open it up to the public. The governor mentioned we did have a mudslide on Parley's Canyon today. Pretty remarkable when you shut down an interstate, how quickly it backs up, and how people notice that right away. Our crews cleared about 40 yards of material, so that's 40 cubic yards of material that came down. Our geotechnical engineers tried to assess this as best as possible. It's still snow covered right now. We see no evidence that this is a deep-seated slide. This area has in the past experienced some very deep-seated slides that results in much more massive earth movements. We don't expect this. We see this as a surface slide at this point. We expect additional material to keep coming down. We have developed response plans for this based on the level of probability and the risk associated with that probability. So everything from a small amount of material comes down, how do we respond to that? If a large amount of material comes down, how do we shut down the canyon very quickly? Obviously, the Department of Public Safety is the folks we turn to make that happen. But then we have detour routes in place to be able to detour people around that. We don't expect to see that in Parley's Canyon. I will say that across the state, we're seeing evidence of water coming through the soil and coming out what we call our cut slopes, those slopes when they go up from the sides of the road. We're seeing that across the entire state. We have several areas that we are watching closely, that we expect further erosion, and along with the rock slides, mudslides, we expect rock slides. About 2 Sundays ago, we had a very large rock come down on US 6 in Price Canyon. We expect more activity in Price Canyon as we transition seasons. So look forward to working with all of our partners to make this transition from a winter season to a summer season happen as smoothly as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor, for the opportunity to take a few minutes to discuss the impacts of this flooding on our agriculture producers. Director Ferry talked a little bit about the early 80s and being a little older than many of our agency directors. I can recall as a scoutmaster taking a group of scouts on a river trip in the river bottoms there at the Bear River in western Cache Valley and not being able to see where the actual river was because the whole river bottoms were flooded. And last night I was able to see and watch some of the community children kayaking down the streets in my hometown of Lewiston. And so we're seeing not only flooding coming down from the mountains, but a lot of flooding in our farm fields. And what this does is this flooding has impacted the ability of our farmers to get their crops planted. For example, our onion farmers who usually have their seeds in the ground, weeks ago, are going to be still weeks out from planting these crops. The problem with that is the early spring frosts can damage those crops and can cause the whole crop to be lost in the fall. So those are some concerns that we have with our crop farmers. In addition to that, our cattlemen are experiencing longer than normal period where they have to feed their cattle. They're going to have to hold their cattle in their feedlots before they let them out onto their grazing allotments because, of course, the grazing allotments are all in the mountains and they're under snow at this time. So it's been very important for them to have the feed supplies that they need. And because they're running short on feed and feed prices are high because of the recent droughts, it creates an extreme hardship on them at this time. So it's very important that we grow hay and grow alfalfa in the state because during these times of disaster, that's what keeps our cattle alive. So just wanted to point that out. We appreciate those who are supportive of our agricultural producers and those who are behind me in these agencies that go to such great extent to keep our citizens safe. And we hope to be able to continue to provide food and fiber for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks to all the members of our team. I should mention Tracy Gruber is here with us from the Department of Health and Human Services as well. Tracy, thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can hear, we have amazing people all across the state that are working on these issues, and there are lots of issues. As Craig mentioned, we've had above average losses when it comes to for our cattlemen and our sheep folks with their calves and their lambs this year because of the cold and the immense amount of snow that is out there. So very challenging time for all of them. I want to thank our public works officials, those that work for the state and those that work for our cities and towns and counties. They are the ones that are out there plowing the roads and putting in immense overtime because of all of the snow. And now that the snow is melting, they're also the ones who are working on filling sandbags and trying to keep the water in the stream beds and the channels and the places that they're supposed to go. I guess I would just conclude with the immortal words of Governor Matheson back in the 80s that this is a hell of a way to run a desert. We're grateful for the water. We need the water. Just one more thing that Joel brought up. I want to thank Utahns for conserving water this year, and let me say why this is so important. Because against what all experts thought that most of our reservoirs would be near empty by the end of the year, because there was so much conservation that happened. Our reservoirs most of them are about half full or a little more than half full when this started, which meant that there's so much water in there. They can release water, and that water goes to the Great Salt Lake or to other places that desperately need it. And that allows more of this overflow that we have to get to these other places. And so I want to point that connection out. Because you saved water this year, the Great Salt Lake will get significantly more. It doesn't all happen at the same time. You saved water in July and August, which means that water in April and March, April, May gets to the Great Salt Lake. And so I just want to make those connections, and that's why we need to keep doing what we've been doing. With that, we're open to answer questions, and anybody here can answer questions as well, if you have any.
After what you've seen these past couple days with how bad the floods have been, is there anything that's going to be done differently or new going into the season of floods that we could have in the next couple months? Sure.
So we try to learn from what's happening out there. What's interesting is because we haven't had any significant flooding, with some exceptions, since 2011, that was one of the biggest winters we've had recently. There have been lots of houses built in places that haven't experienced this type of water. So there are certainly lessons learned there that are important. This is when you find out if there's a weakness in infrastructure. Certainly we saw in Kaysville, Fruit Heights, up on the bench there, where there was significant erosion. My understanding is that a lot of that happened because there was a mistake in how the drainage was built, right? You find that out pretty quickly. And so obviously we'll learn from those things will be repaired. But we've been through floods before. And those of us who were alive in the 80s, and I was filling sandbags at 8 years old with my dad, we know where those flaws are, and the changes that have been made are really, really important. But I have to say, you can never prevent all floods from happening. The debris piece is really important. So just to lay that out, what happens is you have these tunnels, you have these culverts, and they're fine until a tree falls into the river and comes down and blocks that, right? And now the water can't get through there, so it goes up and around. And those are the things that the only way you can prevent that is to have people on standby to get heavy equipment there to pull it out as quickly as you can, and then to have people sandbagging. So what we have in place is working. What happened in Immigration Canyon yesterday, that's the plan. That actually worked. 200 people showed up at 9 o'clock at night to fill sandbags and save homes. That's what we do in these situations. And I feel so lucky to live in a state where people are willing to do that. I will say I did look at the FEMA After Action. I've been studying the 1983 a lot the past few weeks. I actually read the FEMA After Action report, and they talked about the parties that were held. It was a party atmosphere as people got out of church, which I think was the real celebration. And they all went down, and they said that people who were vacationing here, tourists that were here, all joined in. There was music playing, and there's something about us coming together. Nobody knows who's a Republican or who's a Democrat when you're filling a sandbag, and we love that, and we're grateful for people's willingness to serve. Any other questions?
Are there any areas of the state in particular that agencies are focusing on going forward? Like areas you expect to be more vulnerable to these conditions in the coming days and weeks?
All of them. And I mean that sincerely. It's a great question. I have our situation report, the latest one from this afternoon here, and there is action in Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, nothing in Region 4 right now, and Region 5, nothing in Region 6 or 7 right now in our latest report. But the state doesn't know where all the vulnerabilities are, but I can tell you that the cities and counties do. And so our job is to help them get ready and to give them the resources they need, and that's happening. What's been really fun to see is from our smallest towns to our biggest cities, they've been putting sand piles for weeks now in places where they might need them. They've been pre-filling sandbags in places they might need them. And so, yeah, there are lots of places that are vulnerable. Obviously, for a little different reason, Little Cottonwood Canyon, Alta, that area is one of our highest concerns right now, just because of this unprecedented avalanche activity that we're so worried about. But because of the temperatures that are forecast right now, we're not as worried as we might otherwise be. If you show me 3 days in the 80s coming up anytime soon, then I'm really going to start to panic in lots of different ways. But if we can keep it in the 60s with cold nights, that also helps. One of the problems the last few days is we never got below freezing at night, even in some of our higher valleys. I was in Park City to some meetings, and once the snow starts melting, it just compounds on itself until you get those freezing temperatures that slow it down, or those colder temperatures. So if we can do that, keep it in the 60s, maybe hit 70 once in a while, but bounce back down, we're going to be okay for the next few months. Unlike 1983, when we had record snowfall into late May, and then we had 3 days in the upper 80s, and that's when you get a river running down State Street.
For
Carlos?
You mentioned that there's evidence of water coming through the soil. Can you explain the implication of what that means?
Yeah, sure. So the worst thing you can have in infrastructure construction and pavements is having water get into it. So everything we do when we design roadways, bridges, is to keep water away. And so as you start to see water come through the soil, it increases what we refer to as the pore pressure within that soil. And so the ability for soil, rock to stay at a certain angle is based on the strength of that soil. And as the pore pressure increases, the soil gets weaker, and the ability for it to stand at a certain slope decreases. So if you have a slope that's at 45 degrees, the pore pressure is increased because water is infiltrating through it. Perhaps the stability of that slope is 35 degrees, and that's what will generate slides. So that's the thing we are always very sensitive to, is where's the water coming from, where's it going, and we try to keep water away from that infrastructure as much as possible.
And on the sinkhole aspect, are y'all any other areas of concern when it comes to sinkholes, so that we don't have a repeat of Kaysville?
Chris, do you have it? Yeah.
We have the National Weather Service here.
Yeah,
Glenn, do you, Glenn?
Glenn, you're gonna put Glenn on the spot.
Yeah. We're gonna have the National Weather Service. We're really gonna put them on the spot. Glenn's here with us. Glenn, thanks for joining us, please.
Absolutely, thank you. Regarding sinkholes, that is outside of what we focus on. But if you have any other questions about flooding or
Do you want to give us a general overview of what you're seeing?
absolutely, and like we've already heard, this warm up last week was a good thing, and this cool down right now is another good thing. Episodic changes is what we want to see moving forward regarding temperatures. We also want to be focusing on any additional precipitation that may come in the form of rain when that snow is falling. So the outlook moving forward, I can tell you over the next 2 weeks, it looks like a good one, where we warm up again this weekend into early next week, and then we cool down, lock it up, and then we warm up after that. We don't see any big rain on snow events. So right now, looking forward, we're in good shape. So let's keep going.
Thank you. Let me just say on the sinkhole thing. Like, sinkholes by definition are impossible to find. That's so we don't know. We're certainly hopeful that we don't have any of those. I do have concern, and Carlos mentioned that. I do have concerns about mudslides and landslides. The thing about 1983 that was unique, and there were several big ones. One in my backyard up Fairview Canyon, and the biggest in our state's history at Thistle. That many of you will remember and have been reported on. What's so dangerous about those types of slides, not just the houses that are impacted, but if those slides happen into a river, then they create a dam, and then water fills up behind that dam, and then you have a lake, but you don't have a real dam, you have a temporary dam, a mudslide dam, and then that dam gives way, and then you have a wall of water that goes down. And that was the thing about Thistle, obviously devastating to the town of Thistle. It's a dozen, maybe a dozen homes at most. But the scariest part of Thistle was that if that new natural dam broke, Spanish Fork would get washed away by a wall of water, right? And so it really compounds on each other when that happens, and those are things that we are constantly monitoring. As Joel mentioned, 100 of those active slides that are out there. Now, the difference between now and 1983 is that we didn't have 1982. And what people forget is that 1982 was a record year until 1983 came along. And so you were building on a year. Last year, we were setting records, but the other kind of records, right? It was an extremely dry year. So there is less water in the soil than there was in 1983. We had reservoirs that were already filled to capacity in 1982. And so there was nowhere to put the extra water when 1983 came along. We didn't have the type of tunnels and infrastructure. And again, we've created new reservoirs since then. So that's all to give people, I think, a little bit of confidence that we're not going to see a repeat of those big slides that we saw in 1982. But again, it certainly is possible, and that's where we ask people to be vigilant. We've already had one slide that destroyed, I think it destroyed a barn, and there were a couple injuries. So we really want people to be watching. If you're driving in a canyon, keep your eyes peeled for rocks that will come down, for mudslides that may come. Obviously, if you're in the Cottonwood Canyons for any reason, watch for wet slides or snow type avalanches. I think the key here is, like, we've just had all this water come down, and we still haven't got back to the record snowpack from 1983. We're still above that. So much water, such a blessing. This is an exciting thing. It's a good thing. It's what we've been praying for. But also, we don't want it in people's basements. So any other questions? All right, be safe out there. Thanks for